Hello students, welcome to Notebook. Historians and scholars have often used the rich source of traditional texts to understand the distinctive social groups and their differences. These texts provide an insight for us, informing us about the language it was written in, what its contents are, who it was composed by, and for what purpose. These texts enable us to reconstruct history by allowing us to know the distinctly marked social differences. For example, the Mahabharata, with over 1 lakh verses and several depictions spanning over different art forms, is considered an Indian epic. It is believed to have been composed over 1,000 years. This is a text which, in its own way, comments upon conformity to social norms and deviations from them. For example, the central clans of warring cousins can be considered epitomes of conformists, while Shikhandi, Karna, and even to a certain extent Kunti can be considered deviations from the norm. The Mahabharata, originally believed to have been written in Sanskrit, has many versions. In 1919, under the guidance of V.S. Shukthankar, a team of scholars got together to form a critical edition of the text. Several versions of the Sanskrit manuscripts of the Mahabharata were collected. Finally, the common verses to most texts were compiled with critical annotation. These were published in many volumes spanning over 13,000 pages. Various common elements appeared in the Sanskrit versions, collected all over the Indian subcontinent, including Kashmir and Nepal in the north, and Kerala and Tamil Nadu in the south. This project took 47 years to achieve completion. However, there were several variations in the text, regional, and with respect to dialect and social hierarchy. These variations offer valuable insight into the development of the social fabric and history, as well as the interaction between the dominant traditions and the resilient regional heritage. However, it is important to remember that these Sanskrit versions were written by the Brahmanas for their own social group. Later, scholars who studied Pali, Prakrit, and the Tamil version of the Mahabharata found certain discrepancies with the Sanskrit texts. While the Sanskrit versions were considered authoritative and normative, local derivations often challenged and renounced traditional ideas present in Sanskrit texts. Thus, it becomes very important to remember who is writing history and for whom. Kinship is an important aspect of reconstructing social history. While familial ties are often considered natural, defined by blood ties, extended relations and cousins are clubbed under kinfolk. Histories of elite families can be reconstructed by historians easily, as there remains documentation of such histories. However, the same is not the case for ordinary citizens, whose actions and attitudes are as important, if not more, in shaping the course of history. In the Mahabharata, the warring groups of cousins belonged to the same clan, the Kuru dynasty, which ruled over one of the Janapadas. After the Pandavas emerged victorious in the war, patrilineal was established. While it is true that patrilineal existed before the Mahabharata, this traditional text helps assert it as a valuable tradition. Most ruling families thereafter pursued this tradition, mostly sons, in whose absence kinsmen lay claim to the throne. In rare circumstances like that of Prabhavati, women exercised a modicum of authority and control. However, mantras in the rituals of Rig Veda asserted these ideas and were shared by wealthy upper caste men of high authority, including Brahmanas. Sons were deemed important for the continuity of patrilineal. However, the lives of daughters were carefully monitored to ensure they were married at the right time. Exogamy was practiced in their case. The daughters were usually married off to the families claiming a high social status. Thus, Kanyadana, or the giving away of the daughter, was believed to be an important social duty of a father. Dharma Sutras or Dharma Shastras were codes of the conduct written by the Brahmanas. It laid down rules specifically for the Brahmanas. It also delineated certain rules for society in general. The Manusmriti was one such notable work. The Dharma Sutras or Dharma Shastras recorded 8 kinds of marriages. 4 of these were looked upon favorably and regarded as good, while the other 4 denounced. It is possible that those who rejected Brahmanical codes of conduct practiced these. Brahmanical practices grouped people according to their gotras. Gotras were named after Vedic seers. People belonging to the same gotra were considered to be descendants of the seer. Women were expected to renounce their family gotra on marriage and adopt their husband's gotra. People belonging to the same gotra were not allowed to marry. However, the powerful Satavahana rulers of the Deccan did not conform to all these Brahmanical rules. Some of the rulers were polygynous. Women married to these rulers sometimes retained their father's gotras derived from the gotras such as Gautama and Vasishtha. Some of these women belonged to the same gotra as their husband, which meant the practice of endogamy or marrying within the kin was practiced. This enabled a close-knit community. Although the Satavahana community was patrilineal, some of these rulers identified themselves through the name of their mother. This is also known as metronymics. The order of caste was laid down in Dharma Sutras and Dharma Shastras. Brahmanas themselves claimed to be divinely ordained and ranked themselves first. The Shudras were categorized as untouchables and relegated the bottom rung of the social ladder. Ideal occupations were assigned according to the 4 Varnas. The Brahmins were expected to study as well as teach the Vedas to other higher castes. They were also supposed to perform sacrificial rituals, offer and receive gifts. The Kshatriyas were expected to participate in war, protect the people and administer justice across the land. They were also expected to offer sacrificial rituals, study the Vedas and make gifts. It was also expected of the Vaishyas to study the Vedas, offer sacrifices and make gifts. However, they also engaged in agriculture and trade. The Shudras, however, were expected only to menial jobs of the society and serve the higher Varnas. To assert these unjust norms, the Brahmanas pronounced that the Varna or tiered system of caste was divinely constructed. They also ensured that kings in their kingdoms made it mandatory to follow these rules. Common people were also told that this social hierarchy was determined through birth and thus rigid. Since this was also not feasible, texts like Mahabharata were used to reinforce these arbitrary social values. The Shastras propagated that only the Kshatriyas could assume the role of kings. However, this was not always practiced in reality. For example, the Mauryas were considered to be of low origin by the Brahmins, though later Buddhist texts assert that they were Kshatriyas. The successor of the Mauryas, the Shungas and the Kanvas, were Brahmanas. However, in practical life, political power depended on organizational powers, resources and courage, not notions of caste denoted by birth. The Shaka rulers of Central Asia were regarded as lechas or outsiders by the Brahmanas. The most famous Shaka ruler, Rudradaman, is known to have rebuilt the Sudarshana Lake. The famous Gautami Putra Siri Satakani of the Satavahana dynasty ensured that there were no intercaste marriages in his kingdom and strictly implemented the Varna system. However, he himself entered into marriage with the king of Rudradaman, considered a Leccha. Thus, as can be seen, caste was a complex structure that encouraged the practice of exogamy. However, as seen in Indian history, several rulers did not adhere to the Varna system or the practice of exogamy. Jati is also another social category within the Varna system and based on birth. The number of jatis was several and often decided on the basis of a person's occupation. Jatis were often classified by shrenis or guilds and also followed a social hierarchy. However, unfortunately, not all jatis have effective documentation. Sometimes, however, occupational mobility was accessed and people changed their profession. Those who did not adhere to these unjust and arbitrary four-tiered Varna system were conveniently classified as Lecchas. They were looked down upon and labelled as strange, barbaric and uncivilized. The communities that dwelled in the forest relied on it for subsistence. The Nishada is one such example to which Eklavya said to have belonged. Nomadic pastoralists, those who spoke non-Sanskritic languages, could often not be accommodated within the already existing Varna system. This resulted in them being labelled as Lecchas once again by the Brahmanas. However, did moments of conflict arise? What were the alternative social structures? How did historians handle texts like the Mahabharata? To find answers to these questions and more, let us continue with the lesson in the next video. See you soon.